I'm sure most of you have heard of Middle-earth and J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Now, you may or may not have heard of the game called MERP, Middle-earth role-playing game. Honestly, I can't tell you if there's an updated version of it being produced. I'm not even sure if Iron Crown Enterprises, ICE, is still in business, to be honest. I suppose I could have Googled it before I did this, but, you know, hey, we don't all work that way. We're not all Google hounds and nuts. Anyhow, one of the reasons I'm talking to you about this is I thought I would, and I don't want to use the term review because it's not a review as per se. It's not a new system. It's not new. It may be new to you, but it's not new to some of us. And reviewing it, well, I want to just discuss it. I want to talk about it. I want to see if you share some interest in it, and if you do, maybe you'll go out and acquire some of this stuff. I know that if you Google or if you go to eBay, for example, I don't know about Amazon, but I know you can buy used versions of this. People are selling their stuff. They're updating. They're getting out. It's been going on ever since the beginning of this business, I should say. And you might find yourself actually enjoying the system. Middle-earth itself, I'm not going to go into great detail on the mechanics of the game. That's covered by a lot of other people, I've noticed. I've got two versions of it. I got the original, the very first print edition, and I got the updated edition that came out 4 or 5 years after that. It's a little bit more in depth. It runs off of a D100 system. Rollmaster was also produced by ICE, and it's a good rounded system. Although there are parts where it's chunky, and it's in my personal opinion, the magical system is very thin. It doesn't give itself the level and depth that like your traditional Dungeons and Dragon clones do today. And in part, that's because J.R. Tolkien envisioned magic as being a much more subtle thing. There's a reason why the wizards, and there's only 5 of them officially, and they didn't go around weaving, flaming, and flowing lightning bolts and fireballs on a whim. And that's the flavor or the spirit of his world. And magic was more subtle, and a lot of times it was imbued into physical things that just weren't overly flashy. The One Ring is even a doll-looking thing, and it doesn't do a lot of stuff that's apparent, other than turning you invisible. And very few people knew that because, hey, you were invisible, right? And it was the only one of its type. There wasn't hundreds of them. Each of the individuals that followed the other 19 had its own stuff and advantages, and they actually cover that stuff in some of the books, but not to the degree that D&D. Anyhow. Another topic on this stuff is this is basically a source book by today's standards. Back then, it was a game book. I would not call it a module because they actually produced some. Although in MERP, even the modules are very unique because they fit a niche, and that's the whole point of the beauty of the MERP system is every single book individually is not just a work of art, but it focuses on a particular corner of the famous Lord of the Rings world, Middle-earth. And so they go together as a set, as you will. And if your people go adventuring along, if you want to follow the story of the ring, every one of these key locations in the books have got something of this nature. And then there's a few that expand beyond the borders of what's in the books. That's because, well, nobody ever really focused on them as much as they could have. They didn't get into the Far East that much. They didn't get into areas that didn't exist during the world of the Lord of the Rings. So, another concept that comes with this game system is that it has a 3-tier timeline. Now, if you flip in this particular book at the very back, there's a section where it goes on about I probably could have earmarked it, but I didn't. But there's a timeline where it talks about the Third Age one, and then this one here was during the primary story stuff in here is set during Third Age 1442 when Gondor's the last kings of Gondor fought over who was going to be in charge, and eventually ended up turning it over to the stewards. And let's see. Then there's like I said, there's a section on the Third Age, and then one even earlier. So the game system in general, every one of their books, for the most part, give you 3 play zones, if you will, a timeline that you can work from. None of them existed at the time of the War of the Ring. That they reserved that to be either your GM's decision to do this and your players, because you can't. You could, I guess, you could play the party, but it's all scripted. You got to follow the script, otherwise, you're not following the spirit of the game of the book. And well, your choice. That's the beautiful thing about role playing. You could easily rewrite the history of Middle-earth by reacting differently than what the characters in the novels did. So that's up to you. In this particular book, it talks about Isengard and the Northern Gondor. Now, which later, in a different book called Rohan, they actually revisit sections of Northern Gondor again. But at that time, at that point, it's no longer part of Gondor. Politically speaking, it was gifted over to the Rohirrim, and it became the Rohan. But this also refers to mentions of things like the Emmets and Rohan in general. So there's material in here that span quite a bit of different distance. Now, another beautiful thing about the system, as far as I'm concerned, is that they assumed you wanted to know a lot more information than just where to go find the beasties and where the monsters are and who the bad guys are. So we have breakdowns of racial and cultural groups, and explain how they interact with each other, and the men of the time, the elves, the dwarves, the hobbits, the halflings, humans, etc. And there are numerous different types. They give you guides for creating your own campaigns, for integrating this module into your campaigns, guidelines for using your FRP rule system with this module, conversion notes, blah, blah, blah. It has some beautiful maps that come with it. I don't particularly have them on my hand at the table. They're in my storage locker below the RV at the moment, and I will dig them out for when I do another one, because I'd like to review or visit each one of these in turn. Another thing that I liked about this particular system, that probably, first off, the people that worked at ICE at the time that were creating these things, the writers and the designers, were pretty ingenious people, or they were very talented, but they also had a vision, and it's different than a lot of other game systems that I've played and seen. One of the things that makes it stand out is that they went into more detail on everything else that's around you in your world. They're trying to recreate the world for you as a GM and as a player, but it gives you the key tools or descriptions and flavor that you might need to produce. So, for example, it talks about, there's a section on the plants and animals of Cal in Norden. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce most of the words. I've never had a fluency in my tongue, but Northern Gondor, okay? The grasslands, the trees, dangerous animals, small game, birds, healing herbs, it's all in here. I mean, it talks, the gray wolves are once common, black and brown bears and live in the mountains, cardinal horns only, poisonous snake, the green ask, it gives you some working material. And so if your players are adventuring through the neighborhood, you have a lot more idea of just what sort of things they should encounter, generally speaking. Unlike a lot of your fantasy settings, unlike the game systems that we so enamored with, that are thick with all kinds of magical beasts and monsters and humanoids and what have you, MERP is not that set up that way. You just don't run around and run into dragons every other day. You don't run into basilisks and giant ogres and things like that. It's not to say that they don't have their versions of them or that they don't exist. They do, but they have their niches, and you don't find them in some areas. This particular area at the time, well, Most likely, some would be Dragon Slayer would have come along and put the dragon down, or they'd have chased it off, or history would have been rewritten because Rohirrim would not be in the neighborhood if Smaug happened to be living here. I'm just saying, okay, right? There's a place and a time for that sort of stuff. It also goes in another chapter, chapter 5, the Caledorn under Gondor. It talks about the citizens of Caledorn, the government taxes and the army, the weapons and armor, the Caledonians themselves, which are basically common men or urban men, a mixture of the local wildmen and the Numerians that came and settled Gondor, so Gondorians, I guess. Whole section on the Dunlandings, which were the native inhabitants of the region, and why, if you see them in the book and in the books and in the movies, why they were so anti Rohirrim and anti Gondor, because they felt that they had been taken advantage and tromped on and basically usurped from their original territories, which they were. It is what it is. Oh, and the Drúdain, of course, the wild men of the woods. And then we go on to language and writing, religion and the calendar, architecture, the chief towns, breaking them down, goes on and on and on. Then we got the famous Hornburg, Orthiac, Algorod, the Hornburg, Helm's Deep, basically, and Calamari, one of the bigger towns, Orthiac, of course, the Tower of Isengard. It's one of the key focus here. Goes on to the plant here. If you want to know more about what they are, what they do, it's there. That actually crops up in a number of books because there are some deep stories behind them. The tower itself, quite detailed. Each level, each room, got a whole section here on Sir Amanda White, which as an NPC, it was a good person at the time of most of this, although he was leaning towards being very selfish. And eventually, we all know how his ending comes. Maps, floor plans, they do all that stuff. Like I said, they have some good work, and so forth. The glittering caves, power and politics, the Kinstrike. Now, that's gets into some stuff that a lot of GMs, a lot of players. Well, I guess it's a matter of your taste. And I'm always been a guy that likes the wheels within wheels. I like the intrigue. I like it when I have players who are part of the machine, if you will. I guess that's one of the reasons I love Game of Thrones so much, because you're whether you're a big player or a small pawn, you're involved, and your life depends on being engaged or aware or savvy, and or just dumb luck, right? There's some characters in there that should have been whacked a long time ago. We all know that, and for whatever reason, the dumb luck carries on. And then there's the ones that the skill just keeps squeezing their way through. Good luck, Littlefinger. We're all rooting for you to get killed. Anyhow, we're going to Kellerme, the Eastfold, the rivers, East Emmett, West Emmett. Then we get to this latter section. It talks. They actually give you micro. You could say it's a micro module or really good depth in an idea for adventures. They give you a storyline material that you can then adapt and choose to run as a campaign if you wish. That's up to you. And then typical of ICE, we always have these beautiful charts. There's lots of them in most of the books. That each one has something that focuses on some particular, not that's native to that neck of the woods, but also functional in other to be used in the campaign. So they give you the names, codes, forms. In this case, it's talking about special herbs, what they do, how to fix things. Then we get back here, poisons and rotten things, and combat capability summaries. So, if you want to know about the Urk command, the Urkai, their base levels, hit points, that kind of stuff, you got yourself in here so you can use those in the game. And then, like I said, the very last sections right here where it gives you alternate timelines, the Third Age, the Northern Frontier, Third Age 1447, The Fall of Castamere and the Decline of Calderhorn, however you want to pronounce it. Orthiac at Other Times, Sherman and Isengard, so on and so forth. Like I said, Middle-earth, awesome system. Nice, good people. I mean, they made a lot of really good stuff. And I'm telling you, if you get an opportunity to pick up any of these things, they're well worth your time. And ICE itself, for the game system, we'll just briefly, flash a few of these things. We got our own version of the Monster Manual, campaign guides. I've got Havens of Gondor, which technically can be argued as an adventure. Here's the Visions of the Dark Woods. This is definitely a module, but it also ties into a more local area of description and background. The Lost Realm of Cardolan. We're back to having, this book basically works together with this book, and the Rohan book also goes in here. So they all basically deal with similar, or in this particular case, the same Nicola Woods in different timelines that under the control of different people. But together, they give you a really in-depth feel for that particular corner of Middle-earth. And like I said, if you have a chance, you can pick one of these things up cheap. It's worth buying. If for no other reason, just to read, enjoy, to study, and have it on your shelf as a tool for other things, for ideas for your own campaigns and other game systems. If you don't like the rule systems itself, I've said this before numerous times. This particular system, MERP, lends itself to play with the basic Dungeons and Dragons rules. All you got to do is use their rules. Make some slight adjustments. When you're dealing with the D100 system, between the D100s and the D20 system is 1-0. So for all intents and purposes, a 10th level character is a 100th level character in here, if you want to look at it that way. I mean, it's a matter of, maybe it's an exaggeration a little bit, but the mechanics are tweakable. It is something you can adjust. And if you go with the D&D system altogether, you don't use their level system in MERP, the MERP level system anyway, so it's not an issue. You're just using the game material, the world setting, for your campaign. And with that, there's tons of material, tons of good stuff. And what I also have used over the years is their style, their style, and what they consider important for you to know as a GM. I have used that in my own creation and made notations of that when dealing with creating my own worlds. So you learn something from everything you got, and it's a good system. Like I said, get an opportunity to pick that up, I'd take it, look at it, share it with your friends. So we talk again. Y'all have a good